Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." You may be seated.
All right. Good morning. All right. So, like Serena said, I'm Pastor Pat. I'm from Chinese Bible Church, main campus, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys this morning. Let me open us in a word of prayer. All right. God, we just come before you this morning. So blessed to be here, and God, just contemplating your word, wanting it to transform us, to renew us, to make us into something new. God, I pray that this morning, as we just dive into your word, that our minds be grabbed in any way, in a distinct way, and just pulled back to even the truth of what you have for us. So I just give it to you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, if I were to ask a question to you guys, okay, if I were to ask this question, what do you care about? And, I imagine some of you guys might say, I care about, my job or my career, maybe about what college I get into, if there's junior hires in the room, trivia crack, beating my friends at trivia crack, or, like whatever the newest app is. Well, several weeks back, I was having a conversation with my father, and he was sharing with me about this passage. We were talking, it was actually, my dad has a secret passion for Catholic radio, and he doesn't like to tell my mom because she doesn't like that. What we were talking about is this passage, and oftentimes when we read about Peter, okay, in the Bible, okay, we see him through the lens of what would be the one that God would go ahead to go on to use to found his church. In the Roman Catholic Church, in fact, we read, oftentimes this passage would be a passage where we'd look and we'd say, it's an example of Jesus preparing the greatest, one of the greatest leaders, the leader of his church, right? And so, when the question that my dad and I were talking about, we thought it was so interesting. We were saying how Jesus could have asked a number of questions to Peter. Okay, and he could have asked a whole bunch of questions, knowing that Peter was going to go on to lead the church, to be that foundation. He could have said, Peter, do you have an MBA? Peter, do you have a 4.0 GPA? Peter, how are your public communication skills if you're going to, be this new future leader of the church? Peter, are you good at relating with people? Right? How are you good at living in community? Because, a good leader should be able to, deal well with people and this and that, right? And the list goes on, Peter, are you this? Are you that? Are you this? Are you that? But, he instead of asking Peter, you have strong public speaking skills, this and that, Jesus asks this question. He says, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. He says, Peter, do you love me? Tend my flock. And then he asks it again. He says, Peter, do you love me? I don't know if you guys have followed. There's a series going on the TV as well, the AD series. How many of you guys have heard about this series? There's a series on TV and KPBS. It's a Bible series. Anyone follow? No? There's the series that several months back, there's the big Bible series. It's charting the whole Bible, Genesis, all the way up to the resurrection of Christ. It was a big thing. It's a huge hit. And now there's this new series called AD, and it's one of the top watched TV shows all across the nation. I was just talking to our neighbor the other day. She's Jewish, and she was coming up to my mom and just telling my mom, I love the series. This is so interesting. The characters, they just grab me. And you know, like, and you look at the series, and you see kind of like this beautiful image of the Bible unfolding after the resurrection. What happened after the story of the church founding? But one of the interesting things, if you've been watching or maybe you haven't, but in it, they do a lot of character development, right? And as I was watching some of the different ones, I was noticing like how they portrayed Peter and how they portrayed the early apostles, and you know, like in a lot of scenes, the portrayal is these guys had to be some pretty charismatic, outgoing people. Like there had to be something unique about these guys to pull together thousands upon thousands of people that would then go on to change the face of the world and just to see this movement of faith transform, right, and go forth. And that kind of picture isn't necessarily something that's actually like we don't see in the Bible necessarily, like the clarity of the character development. We can come to that, but rather like with Peter, like if you think about Peter up until this point, from all we know about Peter, Peter wasn't very much of a people person. Like in fact, like what I mean by that is if you think back, like some of the key things you think about Peter is Peter cuts a guy's ear off. Okay. Peter typically is the guy that's very antagonistic to all the other disciples. Peter is a fisherman by trade previously. One who, you don't deal with people, you deal with fish. That's your main kind of like, that's your dealings, so to speak. This morning, the question, I want to ask us, or I want to put out there, and why do I put this as is, what does Jesus care about? And I want to say that Jesus doesn't want to know our talents. He wants to know if we love him. And so, in this passage, what we actually see is 3 times that Jesus asked a question to Peter. And so, if you have your Bibles with me, you can open it up, look, okay, and I'm going to take us through those 3 instances of this question. So we're in John chapter 21. It's verse 15 to 17. To give a little background, right before this, they've been out fishing. Okay? There's the group of disciples. This is after the resurrection of Christ, and they went out fishing, and they see a man on the shore. Okay? And the man yells out to them, and he tells them they've been fishing all night, catching nothing. Okay? And he says, "Cast your nets on the other side." And when they do, they pull in a load of, it says 153 fish. Okay? Now, I mean, I don't know about you guys, if you guys fish or whatnot, but like, if you were to get a grasp of that, like, if you go out fishing in the ocean or whatever, you know that, like to catch a couple people pay hundreds of dollars to go out deep sea fishing to catch one tuna, or a couple yellowfin or whatever, or Dorado. And here it is, a bunch of guys who previously, like their identity was, they're fishermen. And they're back out fishing again, even after Jesus resurrected. And they come into the shore and they realize who it is. It's Jesus, actually, that spoke to them. Right? And the first time Jesus says this, okay, he says, what the Bible tells us is it tells us it was after they had finished breakfast. Right? And Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Feed my lambs." See, like, Jesus highlights the fish. You guys notice this? He says, when they had finished eating breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me more than these? And Bible commentators mentioned on this is like, what are these? Are these, it could be the disciples that he's sitting around with. Do you love me more than these friends of yours around me? Do you love me more than having followers, or kind of like having this? Or do you love me more than the things you're eating? Right? Do you love me more than the occupation that you went back to? You're out fishing. I resurrected, only days before this, and Peter's back to his old ways of fishing, right? Like he's back to his old talents, his own skills, his old identity, right? Searching for it there, searching for, to live out his life there. And, this first one, when Jesus highlights the fish, I'm reminded of the story in John 6, 8 to 11. If you guys know, in John 8, 6 to 11, there's the feeding of the 5,000, right? And if you were to think back, when the day that Peter was feeding fish, right? That only a couple of years before this, that Peter was feeding the multitudes, right? Alongside the disciples, right? And you know what? Oftentimes, when we're asked a question for the first time, so for instance, in this passage, we find this question asked 3 different times, right? So the first time, oftentimes we don't get what we're being asked. Okay. So if you were to think of yourself, have you, if you think, at the time when a friend asked you a question, or maybe a teacher asked you a question in class, or maybe your boss asked you a question at work, okay, and you were busy, or maybe you listened, but you heard it, but you didn't really get it, okay? That's kind of what happens oftentimes in the first time. So, the first time here the Bible highlights the fish. It highlights the question, but Peter doesn't get it. We oftentimes don't get it. But then Jesus goes on to ask the question a second time. Right? He says to him a second time, so the passage says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. How many of you guys have moms? Okay, everyone have a mom? Everyone have a mom? Okay. And so, when your mom asks something for the second time, what does that mean? That wrath is going to ensue moments later, right? But, if your mom, when someone asks you something for the second time, okay, and you heard it already once, oftentimes, it's this progression of, now they're patronizing you. I heard the question the first time, right? If you, ever experienced that, I actually get that with my mom. So, my mom, when I used to live with my parents and whatnot, my mom would come in and ask me, a question. She'd walk into my room and she'd, be like, hey, I want to know, how to use something on the internet, and I'm there, it's early morning, and I'm in my boxers, and there's no, boundaries there, and mom just walks in the door, wait for this, guys, as you get older, and then it's I heard the question the first time, but I didn't have an answer, and now she's asking me a second time, and it's almost like she's kind of patronizing me, you don't know how to answer the question. Do you not get it? Do you not get it? So to speak. And, it's kind of a similar thing, I think, we see here, is that, how many of us would be in the same boat, okay? If Jesus came up to us, and Jesus had same boat, constantly prioritizing other things? Will we not be in the same boat, not really like having a response, not really getting it, right? The climax, really the climax, okay, when we look at the Bible in this passage, the climax is actually the third time, right? And in the verse 17, he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved, it says, because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Why was he grieved? Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? Right? Because if you remember, back in John 13, this time it strikes Peter's heart. Because Jesus had foretold that before I die, you're going to deny me 3 times. And when the rooster crows, it struck Peter's heart. And here it is again. It's the same thing. A 3 pattern. Right? Same question, 3 times over. Right? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? And what pops in is this reality that Jesus knows. I mean, same for us. He knows that we don't love him the way we claim we love him. Right? In fact, what I want to say is that I think about this, and Jesus can sniff out the snoozers. I don't know if you ever thought about this. It's kind of like, I don't know. I have a friend. Okay, I won't give a name to that friend. But maybe you guys have this, certain friends. And I was actually in his wedding. It was the best man at my buddy's wedding. I was just hanging out the other day. And he is that type of guy that knew how to kind of manipulate a situation or kind of get you to do this and that, get you to do what he wants. And he'll always kind of used to. He just got married and it's kind of changed a bit. But he used different ways to kind of tweak the situation. Maybe you guys have friends like that. You can think of friends like that. But I was just hanging out at the house the other night, and his wife, he had convinced her to help him out with business stuff. And I was talking to his wife, and and he was gone, and I'm like, don't take this from, we'll call him Joe. That's not his real name. I'm like, no. I know what Joe's doing to you right now. Jill. That's not her name either. That's his wife's name. So he had her assembling things for online business. He's selling this and doing and everything, and it was just, and I'm like, no, he should be doing this. Don't get away with that. I know, I know this guy. I know he's a smoozer. I know him because we've been friends since kindergarten. And it's, Jesus can sniff it out. He can sniff it out when other things have come into place, right? When it's our talents, our skills, our job, or our focus on, being a great community, being missional, right? You could fill any of those in there with the question, like I mentioned before. Jesus could have said, are you good at doing community? Are you good at being missional? Are you good at relating with people? Are you good at, education or music or whatever? But the criterion for the one who had gone to do great things for God was, Peter, do you love me? In 2 Corinthians 5:14-15, it goes on. It says that the love of Christ compels us, because we judge thus, that one has died for all, therefore all have died, and he died for all those so that all those who live died for them and rose again. Uh, uh, the big question here is, you know, if I were to ask you to think about, you know, what are the things you care about? And you know, like, and I want you to think about that. What are the things you care about? You know, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your career, maybe it's school, maybe it's, you know, like having your friends, you know, having more friends or whatnot. Like, have you ever noticed how oftentimes the things we care about are the things we parallel to how what we think God cares most about? Right? So, like, you know, like, I really think that God most, you know, like, I really like music, so I'm sure, like, God most cares that I'm just, like, playing music for him, right? Or I really like, you know, I really care about school, and so what God really must care about, the question that Jesus would ask me would be, you know, like, if I'm going to be a great leader, you know, Peter, do you have a good GPA? You know, feed my sheep. Because that's going to be the sign, right? It's the thing that we've convinced ourselves at times. We convince ourselves, there's a lot of different things we may convince ourselves that tie to what we think is going to make God most happy. And that's going to set us up to be in line with the great leading that he has for us, or the great things that he wants us to do. And that's just not true. In fact, you know, what, you know, like, with regards to thinking about this, and this simple kind of idea, is it pops into my mind, like, why is it that you come to church? Right? Because I was thinking about this last week myself, and when I was a youth, and why I would go to church, or when I was, even as an adult, and why sometimes I don't want to go to church. And for me, I'm on an odd, maybe not a good pastor in this sense, is I actually really was never like super excited about the program of church, like growing up. And then I was reflecting this last week, and I'm like, why is it that I like going to church, and why is it that I don't? And to me, like, it's because church is a place where I go because I want to fall more in love with God. And I want to be around people that love God. Not, you know, like, but that's for me. That's for me, is like the draw to church. And so if I'm in a place and people don't love God, I don't, you know, and it can look many different ways, right? Just like worship can look many different ways, right? What distinguishes the love is not necessarily if one's raising their hands or if one's, you know, like standing in place. It's, in many ways, it's the actual desire to know. It's the actual desire to express yourself in relationship, right? Whether it's hymns or whether it's, you know, songs that repeat the same line over and over again because, you know, we complain about those songs, but the reality is the reason why songs like that exist is because the first time we sing it, we don't get it, and the second time we sing it, we don't get it, and the reason why we sing songs that have lines that repeat over and over again is because hopefully, like, while we're singing it, we begin to get it, right? Whether it's, you know, like, forever God is, you know, I already blinked the song. Forever God is faithful, forever God is strong, forever and ever. You know, I mean, I think that's the prime example. The song just goes on the same line all over again. But we just don't get it, right? We don't get his faithfulness, and so we got to just keep singing it. We don't get his strength and his power to kind of break into our lives, so we just got to keep singing it, right? You know, the climax of it all is, it really hinges upon this question of, you know, like, fill in your name. Do you love me? Right? Like, that's where it's at. And that's the question. It's the same question that Jesus asked Peter is the question he's asking us this morning. And some of you guys, you know, you may think about it, like, how do I prioritize my time? What are the things that have become my focus? And you realize, like, maybe you can answer that question Maybe you're like Peter. The thing is that the gospel says is there was a one who loved God. And there was a one who cared. And there was a one who fed the sheep. His name was Jesus. Right? And there was a one that when he made this statement, he says, I must go so that the Holy Spirit might come. Right? That it's not in ourselves, but there is a one who loved us and made a way so we could begin to actually live that out. To live that out in authentic ways. And so this morning, I actually wanted, in light of like something relevant, and in light of, I feel like, Pastor Clarence isn't here this morning, and things just came up. This last week, on Friday night, it kind of came up. I was thinking about how do we respond to an example of, we talk about love, and what does Jesus care about? It's that we love. There's a recent hashtag that came out on Friday, so you guys probably know about it. It was the hashtag Love Wins. It was all over the news. It was a hashtag in relation to the Supreme Court ruling about gay marriage as a federal law. And a lot of people have had and maybe you guys included, maybe you guys are thinking how do I respond to people in relation to this, right? And I've heard so much about Christians, and we're afraid, about just the decision and this and that. And the catch-22, and people are getting up in arms about how oh no, we need to do something in the government, this and that. And I was reminded of our identity as Christians. Okay? And if you've ever read the book of 1 Peter, you'd know that it's written by Peter, the same one the question was asked this morning. And in a time of suffering and persecution, when the government was ruling and persecuting Christians, and Christians have always, never really had the kind of rights or powers, in the biblical context, we don't see that. We don't see what we have here in America. And in the midst of a government that was, throwing their people to animals to be eaten alive, what the Bible tells us how to respond is that, love wins. And the Bible says, beloved, let us love one another. It says, love is of God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. But he that does not love does not know God, for God is love. That love wins, but the love that wins is Jesus. You see, that no matter what's happening in the world around us, actually what calls out to win is the love and the calling that God has on us. And so I want to close with kind of just sharing, just reading from 1 Peter. 1 Peter 9, and I didn't give this to them with PowerPoint or anything. But this is what it says. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And by the way, I'm sharing this in the context of what does it mean? How do we respond when hashtag love wins? Right? It says, beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of his visitation, when he comes back. It says, a lot of times we forget is that our identity, this is not our kingdom. We are sojourners, we are wandering. The homeland that we search for, in Hebrews it talks about we seek a heavenly homeland, right? A lot of, and we can easily get upset about how we want to see our nation institutionalize, the beliefs of what we believe truth is found in Scripture. But the reality is that we're sojourners here. That amidst like all these things, like what we're seeking is a heavenly homeland. We're seeking Jesus to show up in any and every situation. And like I kind of I think that in light of all these things, I want to encourage you guys. There's if this is something that like you're not really knowing how to respond to Friday. There's a video by Tim Keller. You can Google search Tim Keller homosexuality, and it's a talk. It's a 6-minute talk where he's interviewed at the Veritas Forum, and he really engages like how it is that love wins from the perspective of the cross, and responding to kind of that. So, my overall challenge for us this morning, and my overall question to kind of like I want to leave you guys with this morning is, like, do you love Jesus? Is that your priority? Like, if God were to ask you, do you love Him? Have you let other things become your focus? Whatever it may be. So I'll tell you, the church grows when people fall in love with Jesus, not when they think of new best practices. And vice versa. Like our interactions with our friends at school and this and that. Like, it's not by